Greetings from Garmisch and welcome back to the Marshall Center Voices. I'm Valbona Zeneli. Today I have the great pleasure to introduce a very special session. I was extremely delighted to host Congressman David Price and Congressman Vern Buchanan, the chair and the co-chair of the House Democracy Partnership at our Marshall Center Voices. We had a very interactive conversation on what House Democracy Partnership does and why it's important in sustaining effective and transparent legislative bodies all around the world. The House Democracy Partnership is a bipartisan 20-member commission of the U.S. House of Representatives that works directly with countries around the world to support the development of effective, independent, and responsive legislative institutions. We gathered at the Marshall Center at the end of August with members of parliament from countries in the Western Balkans and Eastern Europe to talk about the importance of effective, transparent, and accountable legislators.
Congressman Price, Congressman Buchanan, welcome to the Marshall Center Voices. I'm delighted you're here. You are American congressmen representing North Carolina and Florida, respectively. Not only are you representing your constituents back home, but for many years you have been championing the importance of effective, responsive, strong, and transparent democratic institutions around the world as the co-chairs of the House Democracy Partnership, which is a bipartisan commission of the U.S. Congress. My first question will be, what drives you to do that? And why is it important to be engaged? Why are you so passionate about House Democracy Partnership? I'd like to start with you, Congressman Price.
Thank you. We are believers in democracy for our country and for other countries, not because America always gets it right, but because the basic values of democracy, human dignity, human rights, the ability for people to have their say in government, those are universal values, which we believe that America thrives in a world where those values are honored. And we also believe as a ethical or moral matter that those values are worth promoting. So we do that, and we do that in a very specific way. And that is through encouraging effective parliamentary government. There are lots of other ways you could promote democracy. Others do that. Our focus is very specific on our colleagues in emerging democracies, where we can learn from each other and help develop effective parliamentary institutions.
Thank you. Congressman Buchanan.
Yeah, well, thanks for this opportunity. The Marshall facility here is just incredible. Let me just tell you that I've never been here before, so I'm very excited about that. I think the biggest thing for me is, as we mentioned, we're working with 21 countries around the world in terms of their democracy, emerging democracies. That's where they'd like to go. It's not perfect, but I think a lot of people agree it's the best system on the planet. And our goal is to really learn from each other. We're not perfect. We've been at it a long time. We still have challenges, but it's a way we can exchange ideas and make our democracies work better, help evolve their democracies, and help ourselves so we can better serve the public. I had one of the younger guys come up to me from one of the countries, Georgia or someone mentioned to me today, that he said, what would be the one thing, because I've been in Congress for a little while, that you'd leave behind? I said, to me, it's all about the focus. You don't forget who you represent. It's not you, it's not your leaders. You're representing the people back in your district. So it's an opportunity just to share different ideas and plenty of challenges, but there's also plenty of opportunities for all of our governments.
Well, thank you. In fact, what you're doing is amazing, and that's so important. So many young parliamentarians all around the world in emerging democracies, as you described. As you mentioned, you have been working for several years with countries around the world. What would you describe some of the common challenges that governments tend to face? We're living in a globalized and interconnected world.
The challenge of democracy is quite a challenge, I guess. I would just say that. The work is never done. And part of the challenge is internal to our countries, kind of keeping the faith in the possibility of democratic government, keeping the faith that we can somehow reach consensus and govern ourselves and find the positive side of human nature that lets us lets us have a democratic system. But there are many, many external threats as well. And the countries that we are talking with here at the Marshall Center this week are all post-communist countries, either either Yugoslavia or the Soviet Union, and they are now emerging, struggling democracies. We have huge respect for what they've achieved, but every one of them is in a fragile state in terms of some current developments and cross currents in their countries. And part of that is, I'm afraid, Russian influence. Russia resurgent, unfortunately, has met anti-democratic values resurgent and a denial of the self-determination of many countries if they want to look toward the West and form positive relationships there, that they should be able to do so. So there are internal and external impediments, and all of these countries have shown great fortitude in addressing those. But we're going to need all that we can muster in the United States and our partner countries to ensure success.
What will be some of the key solutions to solve those issues that Congressman Price just mentioned?
Well, let me just touch base just a little bit on the challenges, because I do think one of the challenges we have, is, along with a lot of these countries, is disinformation, misinformation, state-sponsored news. Who knows what the truth is? I had a young member the other day, we were sitting down the last time on the trip we had, and he said 90% of people in our country get their news off Facebook, and 90% of that news is incorrect or disinformation. And there's a lot of other players in this area, the Russians and others. So I think there's a lot of challenges, but to me, that's the biggest challenges. And I see it back in our own country, how people decipher between what is the right thing or the truth and what is spin on one side or the other. So I think there's a lot of challenges, but I'm optimistic about the future. We'll kind of find a way to work through that, hopefully the best we can, and make a big difference for the people that we serve.
As you mentioned, we're living in an area of great power competition, new strategic competition all around the world. How important is the work of House Democracy Partnership also as a tool of the U.S. Soft power?
I just think it's imperative. I think it's critically important. I think as we continue these dialogues, I think we've made a lot of progress for the last 20 years. There's a lot more work to be done. And every day the world's changed. I mean, this whole thing with COVID, we had a lot of discussion about the impact of that in the last year and a half and today and moving forward as well. So I think there's a lot of challenges, a lot of opportunities. The idea is let's share best practices and best ideas, and all of us try to be able to deliver a higher level of service to our constituents and people we serve. And I get back to it's really about, it's not about us. It's not about our leaders up in Washington or their countries. It's really about our constituents. And in our case, we represent about 800,000 people in our districts. And it's about doing the best we can for them.
Following up, Congressman Price, how do you see the work of House Democracy Partnership going forward in a post-pandemic era? Are there areas where we need to focus more?
Well, certainly the pandemic era has been a challenge because we treasure our relationships with our counterpart members of Parliament, and we lose a lot when we can't go into their countries and see what their situation is like, and when they can't come to Washington and take part in our workshops and our discussions. That includes members and staff. So we've missed each other, and we've missed those interactions. We have continued to some extent, like everybody else, on Zoom. But this meeting at the Marshall Center is our first in-person meeting with fellow parliamentarians for 2 years. So we're very grateful for you making that possible, and we are looking to resume our in-person visits very soon. There may be some changes. I think there are going to be changes in legislative operations domestically and internationally post-pandemic. I think we'll probably continue to have Zoom meetings. Let's hope we'll not just have Zoom meetings, but I think there are some possibilities there for bringing people into conversations and to gatherings that just simply can't take place in person. And we'll have to think about what mix of formats will work for our deliberations. I do think the work is unique, and I don't want to claim too much for it, but you know, sometimes people overlook the legislatures. Our own colleagues do. Vern and I see lots of important people taking trips overseas. And what do? They go into a country, they visit the president, the prime minister, and they're off to the next country. We say to those colleagues, that is a mistake. Not everybody can do what we do with the legislatures, but at least pay some attention to the elected representatives of the people. I mean, for one thing, these are the future leaders of the country, probably. And for another thing, they need to be brought into the dialogue, brought into the picture. And I will claim that for us, that we have, in the Congress, we have stood up for engaging directly and seriously with our counterparts and giving them support and encouragement and sharing best practices. It matters whether these institutions succeed or fail. I mean, democracy is not exactly on the march around the world. Democracy is under a lot of pressures in a lot of places. And the success or failure, I think, is often going to be the success or failure of representative institutions.
It's truly amazing and unique what you do. We're thrilled that you're here at the Marshall Center together with parliamentarians, as you mentioned, from countries in the Western Balkans and Eastern Europe, and we could share this, seminar together. For us at the Marshall Center, also after 18 months that we were in virtual events, it was fantastic to come back all together. And this will be also my last question. In what we do at the Marshall Center and House Democracy Partnership, there are many similarities. So we have similar goals. How do you see this collaboration going forward when it comes to raising capacities for members of parliament and professional staffers in emerging democracies?
I think it's a very exciting possibility. Now, I must say, this is not totally new. It's the first time Vern and I have been here, first time we've had this kind of meeting. But the Marshall Center's been at it a long time. And a lot of my staff members have been to meetings here with their counterparts. And so I think the leadership of the Marshall Center, and I'll give us some credit too, we saw the possibilities early on, pre-pandemic, for a kind of cooperative relationship. And so it kind of came naturally when we're thinking, now how do we get back into business? We can't go bilaterally into all of these countries immediately, but what about a conference? What about a conference that the Marshall Center would host, where we could kind of bring each other up to date on the way things have been going in our legislatures and what the problems look like, and so it's a perfect fit, and that is something that will continue post-pandemic. I promise you. I think our missions are very closely aligned. Marshall Center, as you'd expect, pays a lot of attention to governance. It's not just about military cooperation. Democracies matter and values matter, and the kind of alignment that we have by virtue of shared values matters. And the Marshall Center has cultivated that for a long time, and we have as well. And there are going to be many ways we can do that together.
Well, thank you very much, and we're grateful for your collaboration.
Yeah, it's been very impressive. As Chairman mentioned, we've been here. It's our first time, but I was very impressed about all the offerings that you have here and all the work you've done for a long time, especially on democracy. And probably the most impressive thing is the alumni that you've placed around the world. And I think it has a huge benefit. I heard story after story where you're able to call on each other and make a difference in a country or in a situation. But I'm just terribly impressed with the whole setting here. I thought it was very impressive. The sister city being Aspen. They're two gorgeous cities. And so I'm looking to get back here quickly. But I would say one other quick thing is that I think it is important for us to get also back on the ground in these countries, because it's one thing to have this format. It's a good format, but there's something to be said to be on the ground in Mongolia and some of these other countries that does make a difference too, one-on-one. And also our support team there, the facilities that we have on ground, the people that are working on ground, in terms of the embassies, that makes a big difference. They love to see us, and their governance love to see us, and we're there to help them execute their mission. So it's been a very good, productive day. I felt like we had a lot of good work that was done today, a lot of good information, a lot of conversations back and forth, and I'm excited about tomorrow.
Well, thank you very much again for joining us at the Marshall Center. Thank you for being at the Marshall Center Voices. And we're looking forward to having you back soon to Garmisch.
Thank you.